The night was quieter than usual, blanketed by a soft drizzle that shimmered under the streetlights. It wasn't planned. Nothing about that evening was. But sometimes, the most unforgettable moments in life aren't rehearsed. They simply happen. Xiao Zhan stood by the window, watching the rain paint tiny rivers down the glass. He'd always loved nights like this, calm, melancholic, full of mystery. The city outside seemed to breathe with him, lights flickering like distant stars. Behind him, the faint rustle of movement echoed. Yibo was there, silent but unmistakably present. They had just wrapped up a long day of filming. Hours of camera flashes, retakes, laughter, and exhaustion. Now they were alone, just the two of them. No directors, no fans, no noise. Only the hum of rain and the quiet thud of two heartbeats learning to listen to each other. Still thinking about the scene? Yibo's voice broke the silence, low and careful. Xiao Zhan turned slightly, a faint smile curving his lips. You could tell. Yibo leaned against the doorframe, one hand in his pocket, the other brushing through his hair. That familiar gesture that Xiao Zhan had seen 1,000 times, yet it always made something inside him flutter. You wear your thoughts too openly, Yibo said. I can read you even when you don't say a word. That made Xiao Zhan chuckle softly, a sound that melted into the soft rhythm of the rain. Then maybe you should stop reading me. Some things are meant to stay unspoken. Yibo tilted his head, eyes steady. And if I want to hear them anyway? There it was, that quiet tension that had been building between them for months. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was delicate, like a thread stretched between two souls, invisible yet unbreakable. Xiao Zhan looked away, heart pounding for reasons he didn't want to name. Yibo, you always want to know too much. Maybe, Yibo said, stepping closer. Or maybe I just don't like pretending. The words hung in the air like mist, thick and tender. Xiao Zhan could feel his pulse in his fingertips. Every sound, the rain, the breathing, the faint hum of electricity, faded into nothing but this moment. Yibo came to stand beside him, shoulder brushing against shoulder. Neither spoke. They just stood there, gazing at the city below, two stars caught in the same sky. Do you ever think about how different everything could have been? Xiao Zhan whispered. All the time, Yibo said. But then I remember we're here, right now. And that's enough. Silence. A beautiful, fragile silence that spoke louder than any words. Xiao Zhan turned his head, slowly, almost against his will. Yibo was closer than he thought. Close enough that he could see the reflection of the raindrops in his eyes. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Yibo didn't move, didn't push. He just waited. And that waiting, that patience, was what made Xiao Zhan's breath hitch. Yibo, Xiao Zhan's voice trembled slightly. What are we doing? Something honest, Yibo replied. And then it happened. It wasn't fireworks or chaos. It was soft, impossibly soft, like the first snow landing on warm skin. Their lips met gently, a question and an answer wrapped in the same breath. It wasn't rehearsed or perfect. It was real, warm, fragile, a whisper of something that had been waiting to be born. The world outside disappeared. No fans, no lights, no noise, only rain and heartbeats. Xiao Zhan's fingers brushed Yibo's sleeve, hesitant, but Yibo caught his hand and held it firmly, grounding him. When they finally pulled apart, neither could speak for a moment. The air was trembling with everything unsaid. Yibo smiled first, a small, tender smile that reached his eyes. So that just happened. Xiao Zhan laughed quietly, the sound breaking through the heaviness. You make it sound like an accident. Maybe it was, Yibo said softly, brushing his thumb against Xiao Zhan's knuckles. But it's the best accident I've ever had. Xiao Zhan looked at him, eyes glistening with emotions he could no longer hide. You realize nothing will ever be the same now. I don't want it to be, Yibo whispered. The rain outside had softened to a drizzle. The clock on the wall ticked, marking the seconds of a new beginning neither of them had expected, but both had somehow needed. They sat down by the window, sharing a blanket, their shoulders pressed together. The night outside stretched endlessly, but inside, time seemed to stop. For a long while, it didn't speak. Yibo leaned his head against Xiao Zhan's shoulder, and Xiao Zhan's hand found its way into Yibo's hair, brushing gently. It was a simple touch, but it carried the weight of everything they'd never dared say. You know, Xiao Zhan murmured, for months, I tried to tell myself what I felt wasn't real. Yibo's voice was sleepy, tender. And now, Xiao Zhan said, smiling faintly, I don't want to pretend anymore. Yibo shifted slightly, looking up at him. Then don't. Their eyes met again, that quiet electricity sparking in the space between them. No cameras, no expectations. Just two people who had finally stopped running from a truth. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Cars passing, lights flickering, but their world had shrunk to this small corner of quiet and warmth. Xiao Zhan exhaled slowly. You've always been fearless. That's not true, Yibo said, voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared right now. Of what? Of losing this, Yibo replied, eyes soft and vulnerable. Of waking up tomorrow and realizing it was just a dream. Xiao Zhan's heart clenched. He cupped Yibo's face gently, thumb brushing against his cheek. It's not a dream, Yibo. Not anymore. The rain had stopped completely now. The silence felt sacred, the kind of silence that comes after something beautiful. Yibo's eyes fluttered closed, and for a moment, everything felt infinite. Morning came quietly, golden light spilling through the curtains. Xiao Zhan woke to find Yibo still asleep beside him, peaceful, his head resting lightly on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, Xiao Zhan felt calm. He smiled faintly and brushed a strand of hair away from Yibo's face. Your trouble, you know that? He whispered playfully. Yibo stirred, eyes opening slowly. Good trouble. The best kind, Xiao Zhan replied. They both laughed softly, the kind of laugh that only happens when hearts are at ease. No words could capture that morning. The sunlight, the warmth, the feeling of quiet belonging. It wasn't the grandness of the moment that made it unforgettable. It was the simplicity, the peace, the truth. Later that day, as they stepped outside, the world seemed brighter. The whispers and cameras would eventually return. They always did, but for now it didn't matter. What they shared wasn't about fame or gossip. It was something deeper, the courage to be seen, truly seen by one another. And sometimes that's all love really is, a moment of honesty wrapped in the gentleness of a kiss that changes everything. As they walked side by side, the wind playing with their hair, Xiao Zhan glanced at Yibo and smiled. We'll be fine, right? Yibo squeezed his hand lightly. We already are. The rain had softened to a delicate mist. The world outside blurred into shades of silver and gold. The room still carried the echo of that kiss. Not loud or hurried, but gentle, lingering, like a melody that refused to fade. Xiao Zhan stood very still. His lips tingled with the memory, his heart refusing to calm. Yibo's warmth still lingered against him, faint yet unmistakable, and the air between them was heavy with everything they hadn't said. Neither moved for a long moment. Only the sound of the clock and the rain filled the silence. Finally, Yibo breathed out a quiet laugh, not mockery, but disbelief. You're really bad at pretending, you know that? Xiao Zhan blinked, a small smile tugging at his lips. And you're really good at doing the unexpected. Yibo's eyes softened. You didn't stop me. I didn't want to, Xiao Zhan admitted. The honesty hung in the air, fragile and pure. Yibo took a step closer, his gaze steady, searching. So what does that mean for us? Xiao Zhan's answer came as a whisper. Maybe it means I've been waiting for that moment longer than I wanted to admit. Yibo's breath caught. He didn't reply. He simply reached out, brushing a raindrop from Xiao Zhan's hair. His fingers lingered, tracing the edge of his cheek, a touch so tender it made Xiao Zhan's eyes close for a heartbeat. Outside, the clouds began to break. A single beam of moonlight slipped through, washing the room in silver. Yibo turned toward the window. Look, he said softly. Even the sky's calming down. Xiao Zhan followed his gaze, smiling faintly. Maybe it's because we finally did too. Their reflections shimmered together on the glass. Two outlines framed by moonlight, shoulders brushing, hearts steady. It was quiet, but it felt like the whole universe was holding its breath for them. Yibo's voice broke the stillness again, quieter this time. I was scared, you know. Not of you, but of how much I wanted to. Xiao Zhan met his eyes, warmth spreading through him. You think I wasn't? Yibo smiled, that rare, honest smile that reached his eyes and softened all the edges of the night. He took Xiao Zhan's hand, their fingers fitting naturally, as though they'd always been meant to find each other in the dark. Then maybe we're both brave, he said. Xiao Zhan chuckled lightly. Or foolish. Sometimes, Yibo murmured, those two are the same thing. The words made Xiao Zhan's chest tighten in the best way. He leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against Yibo's. Then let's stay foolish for a little longer. Time slowed. The faint rhythm of rain returned, a soft percussion that matched the beating of their hearts. Yibo's hand came up to cup Xiao Zhan's jaw, thumb tracing slow circles against his skin. He could feel the tremor beneath his touch, not from fear, but from something deeper. When their lips met again, it wasn't a question this time. It was an answer, patient, tender, filled with unspoken promises. The world tilted, the air thickened, and everything faded into that simple, perfect connection. There were no spotlights, no scripts, no expectations. Just two souls finding their way to each other in the quiet. When they parted again, Yibo's breath brushed against Xiao Zhan's ear. You make it hard to say goodbye. Xiao Zhan smiled, eyes still closed. Then, don't. They both laughed softly, their foreheads still touching, the sound quiet but full of warmth. Eventually, they sat back on the couch, shoulders leaning together, watching the last of the rain fade into morning. Xiao Zhan's head rested against Yibo's shoulder, and Yibo's fingers traced idle patterns along his sleeve. It was domestic, simple, but it felt sacred. Do you think anyone would believe us if we told them about this night? Yibo asked, voice a lazy whisper. Probably not, Xiao Zhan replied. And maybe that's a good thing. Yibo nodded slowly. Some things are meant to be ours alone. For a while, neither spoke. They just listened to the silence, to the soft drip of water outside, to the quiet thrum of peace between them. The first rays of dawn began to paint the horizon in pale gold. Xiao Zhan watched the light touch Yibo's face, softening his features, making him look almost unreal. You should sleep, Xiao Zhan murmured. I will, Yibo said. Just not yet. Why? Because I don't want to close my eyes and miss this. The sincerity in his tone made Xiao Zhan's chest ache. He reached up, brushing his thumb gently against Yibo's cheek. You won't. Some things stay, even when the night ends. Yibo smiled again, that slow, quiet smile that said more than words ever could. The two of them sat there until the light grew stronger, until the rain evaporated from the rooftops and the world woke again. But inside, the air still held the softness of that kiss, the tenderness of everything that followed. Later, when they finally stood, Xiao Zhan turned to him one last time before stepping out into the morning sun. Yibo, yeah. Thank you, he said. For what? For not pretending. Yibo's smile was small but sure. Neither did you. And as they walked out together, two quiet figures framed by the first light of day, it felt as though something new had begun. Not loud, not rushed, but real. Because sometimes the first kiss doesn't just happen between lips. It happens between hearts learning, for the first time, to beat in the same rhythm. And that night, with its rain, its quiet, its hesitant laughter, became their rhythm forever. Cloud with Rain, if you loved this emotional continuation, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, Dizzy. Your support helps bring more soft, heartwarming stories like this one to life for fans around the world.